I want you to picture something for just a second. Like imagine you pull out your phone, you open up an AI app, and you ask it to generate an image of a cat riding a skateboard on Mars.
Right, a totally normal Tuesday request.
Yeah, exactly. But in the, I don't know, 5 seconds it takes for that image to actually pop up on your screen, that single request just burned enough electricity to fully charge your smartphone from 0 to 100%.
Which is just wild, right? Completely shatters the way most of us think about this technology because, we hear the word cloud and we just think of something weightless, like it's invisible.
Yeah, just software floating around in the ether somewhere.
Exactly.
Just magic.
Right. And today, the mission for this deep dive is to drag that cloud firmly back down to Earth. Because behind every magical chat interface or, instant essay generator is a shockingly heavy, incredibly hungry physical reality.
Oh, absolutely. We're looking at the massive energy footprint of the AI boom and how governments are basically frantically trying to figure out AI governance before the physical grid literally breaks under the weight of the software.
And to truly grasp the scale of what we're dealing with, we really don't need to look at Silicon Valley. We need to look at Wall Street.
Because the money always reveals the physical reality.
It always does. Always follow the money.
It does. And right now, there is a record-breaking deal that is completely reshaping the financial landscape. So NextEra Energy, which, by the way, happens to be the largest developer of renewable energy in the U.S., is acquiring Dominion Energy.
Right.
And this is a massive, almost $67 billion acquisition.
Yeah, and to understand why that number is so astronomical, you have to look at the map. I mean, Dominion isn't just any utility company. They are the primary power provider for a region in Virginia known as Data Center Alley.
Data Center Alley. I love that name.
It's fitting. It is the densest concentration of data centers anywhere on the planet.
So you essentially have the biggest renewable power player buying the specific utility company that literally keeps the lights on for the global AI industry.
Exactly.
And when you dive into the projections from our sources, I mean, the motive behind a $67 billion price tag is glaringly obvious. The global energy consumption for data centers is projected to hit roughly 945 terawatt hours by 2030.
Which is staggering.
It's huge. That is more than double the 415 terawatt hours they used in 2024.
Yeah.
Just in the U.S. alone, AI could soon be drawing electricity equivalent to 22% of all American households.
What's fascinating here is how this single merger proves that Wall Street has fundamentally shifted its entire paradigm.
How so?
Well, they no longer view traditional electricity companies as these sleepy, regulated public utilities that just send you a bill once a month.
Right, the boring dividend stocks.
Exactly. They now view them as the critical infrastructure of the AI era. They're starting to price utility companies like tech companies. And, it really highlights our core theme for this deep dive. The future of AI isn't just a battle over algorithms. It is entirely about physical power and AI governance.
Agreed.
It's about who gets to generate the electricity, who gets priority to use it, and how governments regulate that distribution.
Okay, let's unpack this because that is a massive conceptual shift. We've basically been treating AI like a brain in a jar.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Like we feed it data, it thinks, it gives us an answer.
Right.
But when you look at 945 terawatt hours, it's not a brain in a jar. It's a massive, incredibly loud, heavily industrial factory.
Yes.
But if these data centers are suddenly demanding the same power as, heavy manufacturing plants, how on earth are the local power grids surviving the onslaught? Because the grid isn't just a magic infinite well of energy.
It's not, and the short answer is that the grids are struggling immensely.
I bet.
Yeah, the electrical grid is essentially a giant balancing act, right? Supply must perfectly meet demand second by second. But the pressure coming from these new AI data centers is ramping up exponentially faster than utility companies can physically build new infrastructure.
Right, because physical building takes time.
Exactly. They're scrambling to upgrade aging transmission systems, the physical high-voltage lines that carry the power from the plant to the city.
And you can't just, lay down hundreds of miles of high-voltage transmission lines over a weekend.
No, not at all.
It requires years of permitting, zoning, construction, all of that.
Precisely. The bureaucracy alone takes years, but the tech companies aren't waiting around. Look at Virginia, where we just mentioned Data Center Alley. Data centers already consume 25% of that state's entire electricity supply.
Wait, a quarter of the whole state's power?
Yes, 25%. Or look at Texas, which operates on an isolated power grid that, already notoriously struggles with extreme weather. In these areas, the sheer demand for AI computing power is entirely outpacing the physical capacity to deliver electricity.
So what happens when they hit that wall? Like, do the tech companies just pause and wait for the grid to catch up?
Not at all. The race is way too lucrative for that.
Right.
Instead, they're being forced to delay certain projects, or, and this is where environmental watchdogs are really sounding the alarm, they're resorting to installing multiple reciprocating generators.
What are those?
Basically, they're localized power generators that run on natural gas, and they're highly inefficient compared to a massive combined cycle power plant. They are essentially spinning up dirty, temporary fossil fuel engines just to bridge the gap and keep the servers online.
Wait, seriously. So to build the pristine, futuristic technology of tomorrow,
Mhm.
we are literally hooking up industrial gas generators just to keep the computers from shutting off.
That is the physical reality right now.
Wow.
And this brings us right to the absolute tightrope of AI governance. This is what policymakers are sweating over right now.
Because they have to step in.
Right, but if a government steps in and says, we need to regulate this, we're capping your energy usage or restricting new data center permits, they run this massive risk of killing their own technological competitiveness.
Because the tech companies will just leave.
Exactly. If you heavily regulate it in one state or country, the tech companies will just pack up and build their data centers in a country with looser rules.
But if they do nothing, the grid literally melts down.
Exactly. It's a lose-lose. Insufficient regulation leads to grid instability. It leads to that forced reliance on high-emission natural gas generators you just mentioned, and it completely torpedoes any international climate goals those governments have committed to.
Yeah, you can't hit net zero if you're running gas generators for chatbots.
Right. If we don't actively govern this physical expansion, the actual copper and wire of the power grid will just buckle under the ambition of the software.
And it's not just a hypothetical ambition. It's turning into a hyper-competitive, politically charged arms race. I mean, the sources point out some really wild rumors right now regarding the sheer scale of what's coming.
Yeah, the sheer size of these models.
Right. So, for instance, there are reports that allies of Donald Trump might be attempting to release a radical new AI model that is supposedly 1,000 times more powerful than Elon Musk's Grok.
1,000 times.
Yeah. And honestly, it really doesn't matter who the specific politicians or billionaires are in this scenario. We're just reporting what's in the source material to illustrate the scale.
Yeah.
The foundational issue here is that you have massively funded entities all trying to build a model exponentially larger than the last guys.
Right.
That kind of rapid, completely unchecked expansion raises massive questions for the communities where these servers are physically located.
Because suddenly a debate about, abstract AI capabilities becomes a very localized debate about community infrastructure.
Right. So if you're listening to this right now and you're opening up your monthly electric bill, are everyday residents going to see their utility rates skyrocket just to subsidize the transmission lines and heavy infrastructure upgrades required for a handful of megacorporations to train their chatbots?
That is the exact fear driving the push for AI governance at the municipal level. And honestly, the answer is yes. It is a very real possibility if it isn't governed correctly.
That's terrifying for the average consumer.
It is. Communities are waking up to this and pushing back. They're actively asking zoning boards why residential ratepayers should absorb higher electricity costs or live with the looming threat of rolling blackouts, while trillion-dollar tech corporations reap all the financial benefits of these public infrastructure upgrades.
Right. Socializing the cost, privatizing the profit.
Exactly. Local governments are stepping in because they realize that leaving AI's physical footprint entirely to the free market means the public ends up subsidizing private AI profits.
But hang on. If governments, whether it's a local zoning board or a federal regulator, are going to govern and regulate AI's footprint, they have to know exactly what that footprint is.
Yeah.
They need data. And this brings us to what I found to be the most baffling part of the sources. We're talking about the most data-obsessed companies in human history.
The kings of tracking.
Yes, these tech giants track every single millisecond of our scrolling. Yet there is a massive, gaping blind spot when it comes to measuring their own carbon footprints.
It is a profound blind spot, and honestly, it makes drafting any kind of effective AI governance nearly impossible.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When we hear about AI consuming power, Almost all the media attention is on the training phase.
Right, the big initial push.
Yeah, we hear about taking billions of parameters and crunching them in a supercomputer for 6 months. And just so we're all on the same page, a parameter is essentially a tiny adjustable dial in the AI's mathematical brain. There are billions of them. And training is the agonizingly complex process of tuning all those dials until the AI learns how to write a poem or recognize a face. Yes, that takes a monumental amount of energy. But the sources highlight that the inference phase, which is when you and I actually ask the trained AI a question, is the real hidden monster.
It's the silent killer of the grid because of the cumulative effect. Inference could actually account for more than 90% of the compute cycle for large language models.
90%.
Yeah.
Okay, let me put it this way. Training an AI is like building a massive state-of-the-art car factory. It takes thousands of tons of steel, concrete, immense electrical power upfront to build it. But inference is like millions of people driving those cars off the lot every single day, year after year. The daily gasoline consumption of millions of cars driving around the world is eventually going to dwarf the energy it took to build the factory in the first place.
And that is exactly what regulators are waking up to. Right now, regulators are only focusing on the smoke coming out of the factory while ignoring the millions of tailpipes on the road.
That is a huge problem.
The core issue is that there is currently no standardized electricity load profile for AI data centers. Carbon footprint assessments across the industry are completely fragmented.
Which means everyone is just inventing their own math to make their environmental reports look good.
Basically, yes. Some companies track only the power drawn by the GPUs, the graphics processing units. Those are the specific chips doing the heavy mathematical lifting. But, I mean, what happens to a computer chip when it does heavy math?
It gets hot. I mean, anyone who has ever rested a laptop on their knees while exporting a video knows it gets burning hot. Now scale that up to a warehouse.
Exactly. So if a company only reports the power going into the GPU, they are completely ignoring the massive industrial cooling systems required to keep those chips from melting down.
Oh.
They're ignoring the power needed for the network switches to communicate, and they almost universally ignore what the industry calls embodied emissions.
Embodied emissions. Okay, break down what that actually encompasses, because it's not just the electricity from the wall, is it?
Not at all. Embodied emissions are the total carbon footprint of the hardware's entire physical existence.
Everything from scratch.
Yeah. It's the diesel burned by the trucks mining the raw silicon. It's the massive energy required in the fabrication plants to etch those complex microscopic circuits.
Right.
It's the steel and concrete poured to build the physical data center in Virginia. And crucially, it's the environmental cost of disposing of or recycling those chips when they become obsolete in 3 years.
Because they upgrade so fast.
Exactly. So if you only measure the electricity flowing through the server while it's turned on, you are missing a gigantic piece of the AI lifecycle.
So if I'm a policymaker trying to govern this space, how can I possibly establish an energy cap or approve a zoning permit if the companies themselves aren't systematically tracking and disclosing this data? It's like trying to enforce a speed limit without a radar gun.
You're flying completely blind. And that is why there is a massive push for standardized AI governance at the international level.
Which is long overdue.
Definitely. The European Union has recently introduced the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, as well as the Energy Efficiency Directive.
Oh.
These are legal frameworks designed to force data centers to report standardized, apples-to-apples metrics.
Metrics like PUE and WE, right? Those pop up a lot in the sources.
Yes, exactly. Power usage effectiveness, PUE, and water usage effectiveness, WU.
Okay, so what do those actually tell us?
So PUE is a ratio that measures how much extra energy a facility uses for overhead, like cooling and lighting, compared to the energy actually used by the computing equipment. If your PUE is high, your building is wasting a ton of power just keeping itself running.
Got it. And the water one?
WEE measures how many liters of water you are evaporating to cool the servers per kilowatt hour of energy used. Because remember, they aren't just using air conditioners. Many of these centers evaporate millions of gallons of water just to absorb the heat.
Wow, millions of gallons.
Yeah. And beyond the EU, the International Organization for Standardization, the ISO, has stepped in. They've just published new TR 2026 8.2025 guidelines.
Okay, another acronym.
Right. But essentially, this provides an actual scientific framework for AI lifecycle assessments, finally tracking everything from the electrical load of the servers to those embodied emissions we just discussed.
Okay, so international regulators are desperately trying to draft the blueprints while the building is already on fire.
Pretty much.
But while the politicians argue over how to measure the smoke, the tech industry is attempting to do what it does best, which is engineer its way out of the crisis.
Of course.
And the sources point out some really fascinating technological solutions, though honestly, they bring their own set of governance headache.
Because innovation always outpaces the rulebook.
Always. Every single time. And one of the most promising hardware solutions right now is edge computing, or edge AI.
Right. Pushing the processing out.
Exactly. The concept is actually beautifully simple. Right now, if you ask an AI on your phone a question, your phone sends that data all the way to a massive data center. The data center does the heavy lifting, and it beams the answer back. Edge AI says, hey, let's just process the data locally, right on the physical device in your hand.
So you are pushing the computation to the edge of the network rather than relying on the centralized cloud.
Exactly. And the energy savings are staggering. The sources mention tests running inference tasks like generating text or analyzing an image on a modern smartphone chip, specifically the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3.
Oh, right, the new ones.
Yeah, and because engineers have figured out how to compress and prune these models to make the math simpler, that tiny chip can actually run the AI locally. In doing so, reduced energy use by over 90% compared to bouncing that same request off a massive cloud server.
90% is huge.
It is. You skip the transmission energy, you skip the massive water cooling. It all just happens in your pocket.
It's an incredibly elegant hardware solution. But, there are software solutions in play, too. And in a fascinating twist of irony, AI is being deployed to solve the very energy grid crisis that its own existence created.
I love when the problem tries to be the solution. How are they doing that?
Well, utility companies and environmental researchers are deploying specialized AI to optimize the grid itself. They are feeding AI decades of weather patterns to design better wind and solar farms.
Oh, to make them more efficient.
Exactly. Calculating the exact millimeter orientation of solar panels as the sun moves, or the optimal aerodynamic spacing of wind turbines.
That's brilliant.
They're even using AI to analyze real-time sensor data in thermal power plants to optimize the cooling cycles, squeezing extra efficiency out of older plants.
And from what I read, it's also tackling the invisible bottleneck.
Yeah.
The bureaucracy.
Significantly. As we mentioned earlier, one of the biggest hurdles to upgrading the grid is the permitting process. It takes years to build a new power plant because humans have to read through mountains of paperwork.
Right, the environmental review.
Yeah. AI is now being trained to digest thousands of pages of environmental impact statements in seconds. The sources cite one project where an AI was fed over 28,000 documents related to nearly 3,000 environmental statements.
Oh, wow.
It's helping to drastically accelerate these sluggish, years-long licensing processes.
So you have AI designing the solar farms, optimizing the cooling, and literally doing the legal paperwork to get them built faster.
Yeah.
It sounds like a perfect feedback loop.
Yeah.
But there's a massive catch here, isn't there?
There is. If we connect this to the bigger picture of AI governance, we hit a fascinating regulatory catch-22.
Okay.
Electric utilities are the bedrock of modern society. Because of that, they operate under strict physical laws and incredibly rigid government regulations. Every single action taken on the power grid must be documented, proven, and mathematically safe. Current AI systems, however, operate as black boxes. They find these brilliant optimizations by recognizing abstract patterns in massive data sets, but they lacked transparent, auditable decision-making processes.
Okay, let me make sure I understand the legal reality of this. If the power grid surges or a blackout damages a city's infrastructure, a human grid operator has to sit down and file a legally binding, detailed report explaining exactly why they pulled a specific lever or routed power to a specific substation at that exact second.
Yes, they have to logically justify their actions to a regulator.
But an AI can't be subpoenaed to explain its own hidden logic, can it?
It cannot, and that is the crux of the catch-22. An AI model might make a routing decision that optimizes grid capacity perfectly 99% of the time, but it cannot write a coherent, legally sound document explaining the specific step-by-step rationale for a complex operational decision.
It just knows it works?
Exactly. The neural network just knows that, statistically, the math worked based on its training data. It cannot explain the why.
Which raises an absolutely massive question. How on earth can grid operators legally hand over the keys of our most critical infrastructure to an AI if it functions as an unexplainable black box?
They really can't.
Like, imagine a federal regulator asking a utility company, "Why did you shut off power to this hospital?" And the company answering, "We don't know. The algorithm just told us it was optimal." That is a total governance nightmare.
It's the ultimate bottleneck. I mean, the technology currently exists to make our power grids vastly more efficient, but our entire legal and regulatory framework is built entirely around human accountability.
Right.
Until the tech industry can develop AI that is inherently explainable, or until governments completely rewrite how we regulate public utilities, we are trapped in this innovation gap.
So what does this all mean? Let's take a step back and look at the entire landscape we've mapped out today. We start by shattering the illusion of the cloud, realizing that AI is actually a heavy, resource-devouring industry. The $67 billion acquisition of Dominion Energy by NextEra is Wall Street's giant flashing neon sign that hard physical energy limits are going to dictate the pace of software growth.
Absolutely.
We saw how the lack of standard carbon measurement, the fact that tech companies aren't even tracking the water and power required for inference and embodied emissions, makes true AI governance almost impossible to draft. And finally, we looked at how the clash between unexplainable black box AI and strict human-centric grid regulations is preventing us from deploying the very optimizations that could save the system.
It really is a powerful reminder of how deeply our digital lives are anchored to the physical Earth. Every time you type a prompt into an AI, you are not just sending data into a magical ether.
You're spinning up a factory.
You are triggering a very real physical reaction in a warehouse miles away. You are spinning up fans, drawing water into cooling systems, and pulling electricity from a grid that is simultaneously trying to keep the lights on in your own home.
The cloud has a massive physical weight. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, something that really builds on everything we've talked about regarding governance and energy.
Okay.
We've discussed the scramble for power, the grid upgrades, and the environmental costs of keeping these servers running. If the future of global economic and technological dominance relies entirely on the ability to generate massive, continuous amounts of electricity, will the winners of the great AI race actually be the countries with the smartest software engineers? Or will the real winners simply be the countries that are most willing to rapidly build nuclear and natural gas power plants, regardless of the environmental cost? It makes you wonder if that invisible digital cloud is eventually going to cast a very dark, very physical shadow over all of us.